Welcome to the Eclipse Stories. Story 1: The Mirror's Memory. The antique mirror arrived at Sarah's apartment on a Tuesday, wrapped in newspapers from 1987. She hadn't ordered it. The delivery man's hands trembled as he set it down, his eyes refusing to meet the ornate silver frame sign. "Here," he whispered, thrusting the clipboard toward her. With desperate urgency, before Sarah could ask questions. Like a man fleeing something unspeakable, he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. The mirror was beautiful too. Beautiful Victorian craftsmanship, with intricate roses carved into the frame, each petal so detailed, it seemed to move in her peripheral vision. But when Sarah looked directly at her reflection, something felt wrong. Her image appeared a half-second too late, as if the mirror needed time to remember who she was supposed to be. That first night she hung it in her bedroom, ignoring the way the temperature dropped 10 degrees. The moment it touched the wall, sleep came fitfully, interrupted by the sensation of being watched. Every time she opened her eyes, her reflection stood ready in the mirror, but something in its posture was different. More rigid, more alert, like a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. By the third day, Sarah noticed her reflection was acting independently. When she brushed her teeth, the mirror Sarah smiled. When she frowned, her reflection laughed, a soundless, terrible expression of joy that made Sarah's skin crawl. She tried covering the mirror with a sheet, but every morning the fabric lay crumpled on the floor, and her reflection waved at her with fingers that moved too slowly, too deliberately. The psychological torment escalated. When Sarah realized she was losing time, hours would vanish while she stood before the mirror, mesmerized by conversations she couldn't remember having with a version of herself that knew things she didn't. Her reflection would mouth words, and Sarah would find herself nodding in agreement to proposals she never heard. Then came the night. She woke to find her reflection standing at the foot of her bed. While she lay sleeping, the mirror, Sarah pressed her hands against the glass, from the inside her mouth forming silent screams. But the real horror was seeing her own sleeping body in the bed through the mirror. Because if she was looking at herself sleeping, where was she really? Sarah stumbled toward the mirror. Her reflection, now wearing clothes she'd never owned, standing in a room that wasn't hers. The mirror world was backwards, but wrong. Shadows fell upward, and behind her reflection lurked shapes that had no counterparts in her real room. "Let me out." Her reflection mouth pressing harder against the glass. Cracks spiderweb from her palms. Sarah reached toward the mirror, her finger trembling as it approached the surface. The moment she touched the glass, she understood with crystalline terror. She wasn't looking at her reflection anymore. She was looking at herself, trapped on the other side, watching someone else wear her face. In her world, the last thing she saw before everything went black was her own body walking away from the mirror, wearing a smile she'd never. Story 2: In the collector's section in the car, Marcus inherited his grand reel. Sarah's hounded silently that he never entered the basement. Her scream, the will was specific. Prison that had been the collection must remain. Someone foolish enough, what collection? His grandfather had been a musician. The mirror still hangs nothing in that apartment. But the sound started immediately. A young man, 3 a.m. Every loves how it makes Marcus the room heard look. Music. He's noticed his reflection seems unnaturally animated. Recently, a child's laughter. Sometimes he catches it waving. At the final note of a nightingale song stretched inside the glass, Sarah screams warnings. Conversations and languages that predated human speech, spoken by voices that had been dead for centuries. The basement door was reinforced with 7 different locks, each key hanging on hooks that looked like tiny nooses. Marcus told himself he'd respect his grandfather's wishes, but curiosity gnawed at him like a living thing. The sounds grew louder each night. more desperate. As if whatever lived below sensed his presence and hunger for discovery. On the seventh night, Marcus found himself standing at the basement door at exactly 3 a.m., the keys cold in his sweating palm. The sounds from below had become a symphony of the damned every human emotion, distilled into audio fragments that made his teeth ache and his vision blur. He opened the first lock, the basement fell silent. The second lock, a whisper. Finally, by the fourth lock, Marcus realized he was crying. Though he didn't know why, his hands moved with mechanical precision, as if controlled by something that understood these mechanisms better than he did. The seventh lock opened, with a sound like breaking bones. The basement wasn't a room. It was a cavern that stretched beyond the physical boundaries of the house. The walls were lined with thousands of glass bottles, each one glowing with a soft, pulsing light, and in each bottle, something moved. Marcus understood with growing horror that his grandfather hadn't been a music teacher. He'd been a collector of sounds. Yes, but not music. He'd captured the final sounds of the dying, the last words of the murdered, the desperate prayers of the abandoned, the silence between heartbeats when a soul realizes it's about to leave its body. Each bottle contained someone's last moment of existence, and they were all aware. They watched Marcus with the attention of a desperate, their trapped sounds creating a chorus of the damned that made reality bend around him. Some bottles contained screams so pure they made his ears bleed. Others held whispers so quiet they seemed to come from inside his own skull. At the center of the collection sat an empty bottle with Marcus's name etched into the glass. "Every collector needs an heir," said a voice behind him. Marcus spun around to find his grandfather, or something wearing his grandfather's face, standing at the bottom of the stairs. The old man's mouth moved, but the words came from the bottles. 1,000 tortured voices, speaking in unison. "I've been waiting for you to complete the collection. One last sound, Marcus." Your sound. Marcus ran for the stairs, but each step he climbed created a new sound. The slap of his feet, the rasp of his breathing, the thundering of his heart. And with each sound, he felt a piece of himself being drawn back toward that empty bottle with his name on it. He made it to the top of the stairs and slammed the door, turning all 7 locks with shaking hands. But silence followed him, complete unnatural silence. His footsteps made no sound. His voice created no vibration. Even his heartbeat had become mute. Looking down, Marcus saw his grandfather, standing at the bottom of the stairs, holding a glowing bottle inside it. A tiny figure that looked exactly like Marcus pounded silently against the glass. The real Marcus tried to scream, but no sound came. He was already in the bottle. He had been from the moment he opened that. The night shift at Memory Lane. The house returned to Emma. Took the security job at the Memory Lane assisted living, settling foundations because she needed to work. When paid cash, no questions. But in the basement, the collection shift was perfect. And sometimes just wandering late at night hallways. Neighbors report hearing a young man's voice, calling someone's name somewhere deep underground. The house goes on sale again. The realtor mentions it has first night wonderful. It was too quiet for a place housing 60 elderly residents. Emma's footsteps echoed strangely, as if the hallways were much longer than they appeared. The fluorescent lights flickered in patterns that seemed almost intentional, and the air held the coppery taste of old pennies and forgotten dreams. Mrs. Chin in room 237 was always standing at her window at exactly 2 a.m., waving at something in the parking lot that Emma couldn't see when Emma waved back. Mrs. Chin's smile revealed too many teeth, far more than any human mouth should hold. By her third night, Emma noticed the residents were all awake during her rounds, sitting on the edges of their beds with perfect posture, watching her pass with eyes that reflected light like cats. They never spoke, but she could hear them whispering in her wake, their conversations following her down corridors that seemed to stretch longer each night. The real horror began when Emma found the memory book in the staff lounge. A thick leather journal, filled with Polaroid photographs of every resident. But not as they were now. These photos showed them decades younger, in situations that made Emma's blood freeze. A young Mrs. Chen standing over a shallow grave. Mr. Rodriguez, holding a bloody knife beside a Christmas tree. Mrs. Thompson kissing a man who was clearly not her husband, while her husband's car burned in the background. Each photo was labeled with dates and locations. And at the bottom of every page, the same handwriting: they remember everything. We help them forget. Emma flipped through page after page of evidence. Murders, disappearances, affairs, crimes that have been covered up for decades. And at the very back of the book, a section titled New Arrivals, with photos of people she recognized from missing person reports, but aged by decades, wearing the same vacant expressions as the current residents. The facility wasn't caring for normal elderly patients. It was housing people who had been made to forget their crimes, their victims, their very identities. But something was bringing those memories back. Emma tried to leave, but the exits had vanished. Every door she remembered now opened into endless corridors, lined with more rooms, more residents, more watchers with too many teeth and reflective eyes. Her radio crackled with her own voice, calling for help, from what sounded like years in the future. She found herself in the basement, a vast underground complex that extended far beyond the building's footprint. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, stretching into darkness, each drawer labeled with a name, and containing what looked like glowing threads. Extracted memories wound onto spools like audio tape. Dr. Morrison, the facility's director, stood at the center of it all, but he wasn't human anymore. His body was translucent, filled with swirling memories that weren't his own. Decades of extracted guilt, fear, and trauma had transformed him into something that fed on human suffering. We help them forget, he said, his voice echoing from every cabinet drawer. But memories want to be remembered. They've been calling to you, Emma. They need a new keeper. Emma realized with crystalline terror that she wasn't a security guard. She was the next memory keeper, selected to replace Dr. Morrison when the accumulated trauma finally destroyed his human form. The residents upstairs weren't patients. They were bait, their partially suppressed memories, broadcasting distress signals to draw in someone capable of storing their darkness. She tried to run, but found herself moving deeper into the facility, drawn by memories that weren't hers. She saw through Mrs. Chun's eyes as she buried her first victim, felt Mr. Rodriguez's satisfaction as he carved up his business partner, experienced Mrs. Thompson's excitement as she watched her husband's car explode. The memories invaded her mind like parasites, each one leaving her a little less Emma, and a little more like them. She understood now why the residents sat so still, why they watched her with such hungry attention. They were waiting for her to become their new repository, their confessor, their keeper of secrets. As Emma felt her own memories fading, replaced by decades of accumulated guilt and violence, she realized the most terrifying truth of all. She had been here before. The Emma who thought she was starting her first night was just another layer of memories, built on the ruins of whoever she had been originally. In the morning, the day shift would find a new resident in the facility, a young woman who couldn't remember her name or how she got there, sitting on the edge of her bed with perfect posture, watching the hallways with eyes that reflected light like mirrors. The Memory Lane Assisted Living Facility is still hiring for night security. The pay is excellent, and they're particularly interested in applicants who don't have many close ties to the outside world. After all, it's easier to forget someone who won't be missed